Hey podcaster, meet Acast. We're the top independent podcast network for creators in the know. We empower you to develop your podcast idea, find your audience, and grow listener relationships wherever those listeners are. You'll also find a whole range of ways to make money, from membership plans for paying fans to our fully curated and creative advertising experience. Visit acast.com/network to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
Hey Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles Insider text service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today, we're going to discuss Tyree Jackson's likely season-ending injury, break down the standouts of the joint practices with the Patriots, and preview the preseason matchup against New England. Chris, I just drank a Red Bull. How are you doing today?
Not bad at all. You know what? I did something different today. I actually went to Wawa, got one of those cappuccino things, and got espresso. So that's how I'm going to get my energy, and hopefully it's going to convey across the mic, man. How you doing?
Good. You know what? Since you bring up Wawa coffee, I'm probably going to get made fun of for this, but I'm a huge fan of like the mint mocha there.
It's not bad. It's not bad.
People don't know this. I don't know if we ever discussed this on the podcast, but when I first got up here, Zach and I lived together. Like I stayed with him for like a month. So podcasts were very convenient because we would just be like in the living room in between watching movies or writing, just do a podcast. But anyway, we used to go to Wawa every morning as we carpooled to practice, and I just got hooked on the Mocha Mint. I haven't had it in like probably a year and a half, but I love it. I did have as I tweeted yesterday, I did have a Wawa lunch. It was wonderful. I got a sandwich and a salad. Always get that salad with the feta there. They've got very good feta. Anyway, Wawa's not a sponsor, although if they'd like to, they can reach out to Mike Rosenstein or Kevin Manahan, see what you want to do there.
Shameless plug.
But I digress. So listen, Chris, breaking news, like right before we got on the microphones, Eagles former quarterback turned tight end standout of the summer, Tyree Jackson, suffered a bone fracture in his back. Many of you guys will recall, you hardcore Eagles fans, of the time where Clay Harbor broke a bone in his back on a Thursday night football game, during a Thursday night football game against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was, I believe, Andy Reid's last year. It was like a brutal game to watch. But I for some reason, I always remember that. And I covered Clay in Jacksonville, and he and I, since he's retired, have become pretty good friends. But I was just reminded of that when the news broke. You were over on the offensive side of the field. I covered defense. We'll get a little bit more into our breakdowns of practice later. But what exactly happened with Tyree that made him suffer this injury?
Well, the thing that happened is, this is what makes it all so disappointing, is he ran a post route and he leapt up in the air and caught the ball over a Patriots defender. And then the way he was like slightly hit towards the lower part of his body, and then he just fell on his back, completely on his back itself. And he slowly he saw he was down for a few seconds, and then he got up and slowly walked away. And the catch itself and impressed Harold Carmichael and Mike Quick. I mean, they saw it and they were like, wow. And it was a really good catch. But then now you find out that you lose him for a minimum of 10 weeks, which by that point, you might as well just say the season. It's a rough thing to go. And I thought he was having a good practice at that point. So the Eagles are losing a good tight end with a lot of promise. And he was balling during training camp. It is crazy.
Well, and we spoke to an Eagles spokesperson who told us that the injury doesn't require surgery, but it does take about 8 to 10 weeks to recover. That sounds like, hey, we're going to redshirt this, bruh, for the remainder of the season, which is kind of where I saw this going. I thought maybe he'd have like a phantom finger injury or whatever, but That said, the Eagles will need to wait till after 53-man roster cuts to place him on IR. If they were to cut him before, they'd have to subject him to waivers. And I think after what he did against the Steelers, after how we've all written about him, probably not a smart idea to just kind of like leave him open to like the Patriots to claim a guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think they'll wait it out. It could affect how they break down the roster. What they could do is if they're going to keep 3 tight ends, they could cut Richard Rodgers because he wouldn't be subject to waivers. And then the next day put Tyree Jackson on IR and bring him back. That happens all the time. We saw it last year when they cut Crayvon LeBlanc to make room for Jason Huntley off the waiver process. They brought him back a couple of days later. So, look, this isn't the end of Tyree Jackson's story. I think they really like what they saw from him. He was running with the second team in the preseason game, his debut as a tight end. And look, if there's no injury, I think he earns a roster spot over Richard Rodgers. You and I both had him over Richard Rodgers in our latest 53-man roster projections. That said, the Eagles seem like they want to go for this. They're not in a rebuild, they're in a reworking, and it looks like they want to be competitive. This division is wide open. I think not the Patriots. I think the Cowboys are going to win this division, but I think a second team can easily win a playoff spot here, and I think Washington, Philadelphia, and the Giants are all kind of in this category of they could either be super busts or they could boom to a playoff spot. I predicted the Eagles would go 9-8 this season. I feel very good about that through 3 weeks of training camp and 1 preseason game. So we'll see how that goes. But if they're in it to win it, I think keeping Richard Rodgers out there, a guy who knows what he's doing, a guy who can play well on special teams, a guy who you saw last year stepped up on the roster, especially with Zach Ertz still potentially being a trade candidate. What do you think of the dynamics of the tight end room right now?
Well, I thought it was interesting before the Jackson injury occurred that they were really working crewmen during the individual sessions and then also during some of the rest of practice. And I don't know if it was an extended look to say, hey, do we want to cut this guy and see if he really should stick around, or they were trying to give him some extra work because he's been out. So I'm very interested to see. I think he's going to get a lot of time. I thought Jack Stoll, the undrafted tight end, the undrafted free agent tight end they got from Indiana, I thought he was going to figure to be a bigger role in this offense and be featured a lot more, but it hasn't been the case. And he's flashed at times, but then also sometimes he made some drops. So I think the room is pretty deep. I mean, everybody knows that Zach Ertz is going to continue and Dallas Goedert are going to continue to get their targets. That third guy, like you mentioned, is a special teams guy or even maybe a goal line. And you just want to have a guy who's potentially going to be a combination good blocker and a good receiver in that role. And I think Rodgers definitely fills it. It's a matter now, I think, of especially that first game, if they cut Rodgers to make sure that his contract's not guaranteed, do you basically go with Kroom or do you go with Stoll? And right now, if I had to go between the two, I think Kroom would be that guy.
Yeah, I think when you look at this tight end group, obviously if Ertz and Goddard are both here, I think Ertz has kind of warmed up to the idea of, hey, he's going to be around. I still don't think it's a guarantee he'll be here week 1, but I do think he's kind of warmed up to that concept. Obviously Goddard will be here. Look, their tight end room is a strength, especially with the wide receivers being young and still growing. And I think Richard Rodgers has proven to be a reliable guy when he's been healthy. Clearly, the front office likes him. They brought him back about 45 times. He's basically the better Blake Countess version of a tight end.
Hail Mary specialist, too.
But on the subject of tight end, I think we need to talk about the 5 cuts that the Eagles made to get down to 86. Technically, Matt Leo doesn't count because he's an international exemption player. So they technically have 85 players on their roster. Tight end, Caleb Wilson was cut. We talked about him on the postgame pod last week. Brutal blocking penalty. Like one of the most egregious blocking penalties I've seen in a really long time on a 28-yard run from Jason Huntley. Jack Stoll also got flagged for holding as well on that play, but Caleb Wilson just kind of seemed out of it. He was a practice squad player who played 5 games last year, all on special teams. He got claimed actually by Washington, who had him before the Eagles last summer. So he got claimed. He got another a shot after getting released early, which I respect teams that kind of rip the Band-Aid off there. Then they also waived Adrian Killins, who came into the league and played college football at running back, but then they converted him to wide receiver. He was playing mostly in the slot. He was targeted on that second interception by Nick Mullins last week against the Steelers. I'm a little bit surprised that he got cut this early, especially with the wide receiver injuries and the running back injuries, frankly, because Jason Huntley's sidelined, and as we're about to talk about the three other waivings that they did on Tuesday, the running back room is kind of light, especially if you want to preserve guys like Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, and Jordan Howard. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. And then, so at wide receiver, you've got guys like John Hightower coming back from injury, Devontae Smith coming back from injury. Plus, you don't really want to play Devontae Smith a ton. Same with Rager, same with Quez Watkins, same with Travis Fulgham. So it's interesting that they let him go early. He cleared waivers and then signed with the Broncos on Tuesday. So it's good when teams, you have good depth when two players who you cut in the first round of cuts get picked up by other teams. I think that says something about the depth you have. I've never thought that the Eagles roster was as bad as everybody else thought it was, but clearly the NFL doesn't either. Let's get into those three other cuts, because that's what I really want your perspective on. So they waive injured both Casey Tucker and Luke Juriga, two depth offensive linemen. Luke Juriga kind of profiles as a bigger Jason Kelce. I think if he clears waivers, they won't give him an injury settlement. His season's done. He'll be on IR. He had an ankle injury. And then they'll go from there. Casey Tucker's kind of just been like this perennial practice or training camp guy. He's been on the practice squad occasionally. But the big one is Kerryon Johnson was waived injured. He suffered a knee injury against the Steelers. It looked like he got injured on a play where he ran, kind of tripped, then got up and kind of ran a little bit gingerly. I think he stayed in the game a little bit, but we don't know the extent of his injury. We just knew it was week to week. Made sense to me, kind of predictable that they'd cut him. They need the roster spot at this point. What's your perspective now on the running back room with kind of Elijah Holyfield and Kenny Gainwell having to kind of, hold down the fort for the most of the preseason now?
Well, I'll start out with Johnson. It was disappointing to see that that he was waived, because he was having a good camp. He got injured, I should say, because I thought he was having a good camp, and I thought a little bit better than Jordan Howard, even though Jordan Howard had that really good block in the game against the Steelers. But when you look at the rest of his room, Gainwell looks like he's starting to pick up this offense a little bit better now. And because of that, he's not thinking as much, which means he's playing a lot faster. And you're starting to see him at times get in there with the first team, mainly the second team, but he got a couple first team snaps. So I think you'll see certain packages where he's utilized, especially with him and Miles Sanders or him and Boston Scott. I mean, that's a lot of speed that you have on the field there. So that's pretty good. When it comes to Elijah Holyfield, he hasn't had the best. He's like Jordan Howard in a way. He does really well when it comes to running in short yard situations, but he's had a lot of critical drops, especially during 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s, and especially with Nick Sirianni saying that the running backs are going to be used a lot in this offense in the passing game. That doesn't bode well, I think, in my opinion, for him. So I can see him coming back as a practice squad guy. I wouldn't be opposed to that, especially if you need somebody goes down and he has familiarity with the system. So I say go with that. But it just goes to show you that this running back room is still very, very deep, because now you're rolling with Sanders, Scott, Gainwell, and Jordan Howard as well. I mean, that's a nice core four that you have that you can mix in and use in a variety of ways depending on the opponent.
Yeah, I don't think there's a luckier guy on this roster than Elijah Holyfield, who would almost definitely be cut if Kerryon Johnson wasn't injured. Let's kind of get into the standouts of the joint practices now that we've gone through the cuts. To me, well, I mean, I think from the offensive perspective, we split up. So the way joint practices work will give you a little bit of insight. The two teams split up into offensive and defensive groups. So the Patriots offense plays the Eagles defense. The Eagles defense plays, the Eagles offense plays the Patriots defense. Special teams goes and hosts a puppet show or something. I don't know what they do until the end where they try for kicks. But yeah, take me through, 3 or 4 offensive standouts. I think the obvious one, based on social media, is Jalen Reagor. Talk to me about Jalen Reagor and some of the other guys.
2 of them are receivers for sure. Jalen Reagor, he made that one outstanding one-handed catch. I mean, he leapt up and caught that thing. It was just it was nice. But just besides that one catch itself, he's catching the ball cleanly with his hands, and he's running his routes a lot better. It seems like he needed these joint practices, because when they were going against the Eagles defense, it just seemed like he was messing up a lot, what have you, dropping passes. This week, it looks like he's just like tuned into what he's supposed to be doing. He's making these good cuts. He's getting a lot of separation now, and he's flashing himself in the middle of the field so that Hurts can see him and deliver the ball. So I really like the way that Rager's playing. Once again, Quez Watkins played well. Excuse me. During a one-on-one sessions, I believe it was a catch over Michael Jackson Sr., he basically ripped the ball away from him and then basically backpedaled into the end zone, which was...
He backpedaled against Michael Jackson Sr.?
Think about it's the moonwalk thing's right there, and I'm mad I didn't think about it. Ow! Sorry. Now I'm regretting not putting that in the story that way. But yeah, he's been playing well. He's still continuing his strong camp. Offensive line, Sua Opeta to me had played really, really well. I still vividly remember the one play where he and Toth are basically opened a seam for Boston Scott, where he basically got into the pads of the Patriots defensive end and just pushed them back about a good 5 yards, and then went ahead, not only just tossed him aside a little bit, then went to the second level and got to a linebacker. So I thought Opeta did very well and flashed in there. Getting back to Jalen Hurts, I thought he had a great first day. He was on target, and he was dishing the ball out very well on time. Balls were in a good area where they had to be. That second day, I thought he was a little sporadic. There were times when he would loft the ball up and be on point and accurate, but then it seemed like to settle back in, especially during 707. It was just erratic. And at one point, he basically kept the ball, held on the ball, and ran the ball. And it didn't like Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni are too pleased, because there was a time when Devonta Smith was starting to break open, and Sirianni pulled him aside. They had a chat for about a minute, but then he came back and played a lot better. So you'll see that with him. He's still a young quarterback. He's still getting used to the league, and it looks like they're trying to hammer home from him throwing from the pocket a little bit more, making the decisions even quicker. But those will be the people who stood out for me on offense. Who stood out on defense?
Last summer, sleep kept us sane through the silence. This summer, you're going to need sleep to get over all of this. That's why it's the perfect time to upgrade to a Nectar mattress and get award-winning, precision-engineered sleep at incredible value. Prices start at just $499, and you get $399 in accessories thrown in, a 365-night home trial, and a forever warranty. Go to nectarsleep.com.
Did you know this podcast is powered by Acast? Acast is the home of podcasting. For creators looking for freedom to grow their listeners and make money too. And creative brands looking for smart ways to advertise. Podcasters and advertisers in the know Acast. It's time you did too. Visit Acast.com to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
It was a linebacker party. Look, Alex Singleton was everywhere. He drew praise from Nick Rallis pretty regularly over the span of the 2 days. Eric Wilson closed out first team reps during the first set of joint practices with a pass breakup against the first team offense of the Patriots, and then he picked off Cam Newton in the end zone. I think TJ Edwards has looked really good. He had an interception 7-on-7 work. And then on the defensive line, Javon Hargrave missed the second practice with an injury. I think he'll be fine. He's listed as day-to-day. But that first practice, he was getting pressure constantly in team drills. He was constantly in Cam Newton's face. In fact, one of his pressures led to the Eric Wilson interception and team drills for the first team. He also had another sack. Hassan Ridgeway, who replaced Hargrave the next day opposite Fletcher Cox, who, by the way, Fletcher Cox had a sack and a pass breakup the first day of joint practices as well. Ridgeway looked good as well. He looks like he belongs. I think he's the third defensive tackle, especially with the way that they're using Milton Williams on the outside. So I think this front's going to be very, very good. We've talked about it. They're using some 4-3 under looks, which is essentially you have two, I guess you would call regular off-ball linebackers who have hook responsibilities in coverage and in zone. Then you have, you have 3 down linemen, an edge rusher who stands up, and then in base you would have what Gus Bradley used to call an auto. So it's basically a widespread 3-4 style outside linebacker who would play typically at Sam, but he could also play on Will as well. He's going to rush, but it's kind of like a hybrid between being a 3-4 outside rusher and being in the wide 9, only you're standing up. So the players that they're using there right now are Jannard Avery, who's injured, Joe Osman, who has a concussion, and 7th-round rookie Patrick Johnson. Frankly, Patrick Johnson has looked very good since the preseason game against the Steelers. I was extremely impressed. He was one of the few guys, he and Elijah Riley were like the 2 guys from that second half of that game that I came away extremely impressed by. That said, I don't know what type of world there is where he's starting for this team, right out the bat as a rookie. Honestly, when I look at the auto position, Alex Singleton is like tailor-made for it. He's a great blitzer. He's good in coverage. He can tackle well in space. He makes a ton of sense. Like if I were running this defense, I would have Alex Singleton and Eric Wilson be 3 down linebackers. When Singleton and Eric Wilson are in there, they're the 2 nickel linebackers. When Edwards comes in, Wilson moves out to Will, Alex Singleton moves out to Otto, and Edwards is the middle linebacker. Like that's how I would run it. Those are the 3 best linebackers on the team. Alex Singleton, if you're going to use an auto linebacker or an elephant or whatever you want to call it, he makes more sense as opposed to Avery or Osman, who were more Leo style guys, those weak side edge rushers that Gus Bradley and all those guys liked. But right now at that Leo position, even though they're not calling it Leo, is a speed guy like Josh Sweat. You also have Derek Barnett over there and Tyree Jackson. I know I'm going on a diatribe here, but when you look at the 4-3 under, like to me, are we on the same page about the linebacker usage in this top 3 guys?
First off, I wish there was a video because I got like goosebumps right now hearing talk about like all these formations and that. I love it. But
I knew covering the Jaguars would eventually pay off.
Oh, see, it pays to be in Jacksonville sometimes. Anywho, yeah, I mean they're very, and that's the good thing about this position. They're very athletic, and to me, a lot of times they're pretty much interchangeable. I mean, there's some guys like Edwards I'm not going to rely on being in coverage too much. I mean, he can hold his own for a little bit, but I wouldn't make a habit of that. But yeah, that was a very spot on explanation of the way the usage that they use and the ways they can use them. And then don't be surprised. I mean, there's so many different fronts there's so many different fronts and different looks that they can come out of that. They've been using that. I mean, Gannon looks like he's going to Gannon. No, I'm not going to put that label on him yet, but it's very, I'm curious to see the creative blitzes packages that he uses from week to week. That's the one thing, especially with these linebackers. That's why I'm really curious to see how he's going to use them. But that was actually a very good assessment.
Thanks for being surprised.
Oh no.
We've been very positive on this podcast outside of the Tyree Jackson stuff, but from a negative standpoint, N'Keal Harry and Nelson Aguilar both owned the depth corners on Monday. Like, it was extremely one-sided. Yesterday, Tuesday, it was a little bit more even. Especially with Darius Slay and Steve Nelson playing a little bit more individual drills, working in coverage. But yeah, like right now, your cornerback group is probably Darius Slay, Steven Nelson, or Steve Nelson as he likes to be called, Avonte Maddox, who just was abused by N'Keal Harry, both on size and speed in the slot. Zach McPherson, who was up and down, as you'd expect, especially against Harry. And then from there, you've got a fifth spot. They've moved Graylin Arnold from safety to nickel corner, and I wonder if that might help him make the roster. I don't think it will. I still think he's kind of on the outside looking in, but with Craig James sidelined with a foot injury, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that fifth spot, because frankly, Michael Jacquet, if he is not holding an opponent, they are blowing past him. Like, Harry just absolutely abused this guy throughout the week. Jacquet, I think, in one of their matchups forced an incompletion, but it was more to do with the ball placement than anything. It was a lot like what you saw against the Steelers, where Deontay Johnson caught that 30-yard pass. Like, if he's not getting his hands on you, if you beat him off the line, he's done. Like, and you know what? I think he is practice squad worthy, and that's why you keep him around. I also think his size is interesting. And remember, he converted to cornerback just 2 years ago, so he's still kind of learning the position. But man, I don't know how you put this guy out there regularly. I'm not impressed. I think he's good against the run because of his size, but for the most part, I don't know where you're at with that. But
well, it's crazy because you saw. I'm sorry. Let me interrupt. Sorry. It was just like all you saw was a flag from either the back judge or the field judge. It seems like whenever Jacquet was out there, it was a flag, no matter what. He's physical, and I can see this like in a system that gives him a lot of safety help. I can see an instance where you can keep him on the field, but like you said, like you're going to have to give a lot of help and dive and basically shade that corner over that way. And to me, if you're going to have a corner playing a lot of the playing time like that, and it takes away from one half of the field, it's not worth it. It's so he can if he needs time to develop. He's still very young, and I'm really enamored with his physical side, but his coverage, especially against a speed guy or a guy who's has a few moves instead of just one move, getting off the line and avoiding that chuck is rough. And to me, and going back to Graylin Arnold, he's made a lot of plays, but to me, he's still a safety. And his instincts is the way he's dropping everything else. His instincts, I just still see screams of safety still. I know he played cornerback at times, and it's great, but he just screams of safety. But Jacquet is, I think the experiment's over on a regular roster. So I think that experiment's over.
So I feel like we don't talk about Travis Fulgham a lot. He's dropped a lot of passes. He's still made some really intriguing plays, but to me, he's a body catcher. And you could see it kind of after the Steelers game. Like, he had a bunch of really good hand catches against the 49ers and Steelers combined. And then after that, he became kind of a body catcher. There seems to be like a eye discipline issue, at least from the outside looking in. Talk to me about Fulgham and then maybe some of the guys that didn't impress on the offensive side of the ball against the Patriots.
Fulgham is still working. With him, it's either he's running his routes not to the way that the offensive coaching staff wants him to run it. He's lining up in the wrong position. There's been a couple of times where you see the quarterbacks or coach have to get him into the right spot. And you see this guy who had that 4-game stretch who looked like the best wide receiver in the league at times even though it was a 4-game stretch, to see him now, like he's having trouble lining up, it raises a lot of questions. And this is not hot take city or anything else like that, but it's come to a point where I think JJ Arcega-Whiteside has had the same camp, if not a little bit better camp, just because he's catching the ball a lot cleaner. He seems to be lining up in the right positions, but we all know what JJ Arcega-Whiteside has done in the past. So that he's bringing up a big red flag to me. I mean, I think Andre Patton's played decently. I'm not saying he's going to make the roster before anybody thinks like, oh, he's the guy that's going to, I don't think so, but I thought there's times where he's performed better than the way Fogelman has at practice. And the physical traits, the physical talent is there. I don't know if he just has trouble like comprehending the stuff or the offense, or is like, I remember there's the talk about his practice habits. I don't know if it's not a game where he just seems like he's out of it. I don't know, but it's getting to the point where it's like, all right, is he your fourth, fifth guy now? I mean, Hightower's starting to pick it up. John Hightower's picking it up a little bit too. So I'm at the point where you're looking at Devonta Smith at one, Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor, and now probably Quez Watkins are your top three, with your fourth being that you still have to figure the front office still going to give J.J. Arcega-Whiteside every chance. Do they move him to the fourth wide receiver? And then I put Fogelman as the five guy. It's been disappointing camp for him, and it's sad to see in a way, given that what we know he's capable of.
Yeah, and so I think that's a good segue into the preview for for the preseason coverage of Eagles versus Patriots. Let's kind of talk about three guys that we need to see step up in this game. You know, the preseason is one game less. I'm going to guess that the starters play 4 to 5 series in this game, being that the defense only played 1 last week. The offense only played 2. And I think this is a guess. Don't quote me here, but this is a guess that the starters won't play in this third game, based on the joint practices and all the work they're doing. So, yeah, Chris, give me 3 guys that you think really need to step up starting Thursday, that are on the bubble, that need to kind of do what they can to kind of stick around.
All right, I'll start quarterback first, Nick Mullins. I think it may be a roster thing where they need to go with 2 just to hide a spot for somebody else, but he started out camp looking very, very good. He's getting the ball out accurately, quickly, and moving around, but then it seems lately, I don't know if everybody else is caught up to the way he plays, but he's been inaccurate at times. He's throwing the ball kind of every which way, and he's made a couple poor throwing decisions. So I want to see how he bounces back in this upcoming game. I want to see if Jason Kroom is ready. I want to see what he can do to prove that he can be a guy that can contribute in some way, shape, or form on his offense, given the chance. I mean, what was it? Was he the one that they threw, I think, against the Giants game? Like he was just standing all alone in the corner and he threw his way and got caught a touchdown. Like, that's nice to be that open, but if you can't do anything else, can't do that. And then I'd probably say on the defensive side, yeah, I'm going to have to say I want to see what T.Y. McGill, because given that I think when you look at the way that defensive tackle spot is shaping up, you know you're going to have Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. That's a given. You know Hassan Ridgeway. I still think Milton Williams, okay, is he D and D tackle? Okay, he can play both. But I thought Raekwon Williams has had a good camp. And McGill's had a decent camp too. But given that if they decide to go either bigger fronts or they decide to play odd fronts, Williams' size is good at a nose tackle, but I want to see what McGill can do not only in pass rush, but comes to stuff in the run. So those I'd probably say would be 3 guys that I'd be interested in seeing what they do. How about you?
I don't know. You were very on brand there with the deep cuts, who are probably not. None of them are going to make the roster. But anyway,
thanks.
well, I'm going to go with John Hightower. Okay, so he missed about 10 days of work with a groin injury. He missed the first preseason game. I view him being on the outside of the top 6 wide receivers. That includes obviously Smith, Rager, Quez Watkins, Travis Fulgham, and then Greg Ward and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think he needs to make some legitimate plays, not only on offense, but on special teams. He didn't play special teams last year. He's got good speed. I wonder if he could play gunner, but I also don't know if he can get off press, from the jammers. So that's interesting. But he needs to make some big plays here. This is his time to shine, because really the chances are soaking up. And frankly, this room's young enough as it is. He's a 25-year-old second-year player. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside's a former second-round pick. Greg Ward's the veteran of the group and the leader. He's going to have to outduel both of them. Quez Watkins clearly has a roster spot. He's clearly going to have a major role. Jalen Reagor and Devontae Smith obviously are going to be the featured guys. Travis Fulgham, even if he had an awful camp, if it closed out today, he's still a guy who fits a mold that nobody else on the roster has. So he's going to stick around. We need to see something from Hightower soon, because I don't think the Eagles are going to be very patient with him. I think, we talked about him before, Michael Jacquet. Can he not hold a player and be successful? That, to me, that's really what it is, because frankly, the golden opportunity is right in front of him. Craig James is sidelined. Kayvon Seymour is an afterthought. Josiah Scott's going to play nickel, so he'd probably be the 6th corner and back up Avonte Maddox. I just don't see where Michael Jacquet fits if he does not play well against the Patriots and then against the Jets. And then I guess, my last guy would be Tyree Jackson. I think he's been kind of up and down in training camp. He was okay in the preseason. He's a guy I'm intrigued by, size, speed, college resume wise. But it seems like if you look at the defensive end group, it's Brandon Graham, Milton Williams, Ryan Kerrigan, Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett. And then what are you doing with that 6th spot? And do you keep 6? Because I think they'll keep 10 to 11 defensive linemen. I just don't know if you need another weak side edge rusher with the way you're using Jannard Avery. If you keep Jannard Avery, if you're keeping Joe Osman with the way you're keeping Joe Osman. So it's intriguing to me. I don't really have I don't feel like I've got a good feel for those last 2 spots in the defensive line room. Personally, I would keep more D tackles than stocking up on the D ends, because I think Kerrigan can be moved around. I like what you've got with Milton Williams, etc. Whoop! As an alarm goes off, and that tells us we need to wrap up soon. But I think Tyree Jackson needs to, force the Eagles to keep 6 defensive ends. So on that note, we're going to wrap up the show. Remember to subscribe to Eagles Extra, NJ.com/text. It's free for 2 weeks. Enjoy the rest of training camp coverage with Chris and myself. And then make sure to subscribe to the No Huddle Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Give us 5-star ratings. Give us some feedback. We love hearing from you. For Chris, I'm Mike. We'll see you soon.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's an episode we recommend.
What up, though? I'm Jalen Rose. I partner with the New York Post to bring you the Renaissance Man podcast. Each week, we're discussing the latest trends in culture, fashion, entertainment, travel, food, and more. My most recent guest is none other than the legendary makeup artist, Bobbi Brown. I talked to Bobbi about the changes she's seen in the beauty industry and using your insecurities to drive your career. You can find the Renaissance Man podcast every Thursday on Apple, Spotify, or any of your preferred podcast platforms.
Acast recommends.